Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fridays with Sue and Steph. And we are here in our Friday formal. Happy to be with you. And today we're going to talk about, you get perspective in life and you look back on the things you worried about. And everybody has so much wisdom retrospectively that I don't want to say anybody should take our advice. Like, you have to live through a lot of these things. And part of my baby is graduating college next week, which I'm really emotional about. Like, it's so crazy that my fifth kid we're done with tuition. That's great news. But, it's like they're all adults. It's crazy. And my youngest, he was a only child for 4 years. Like, he was really in our marriage. So anyway, I can tell you that with 5 kids, I had the opportunity to do differently each time because there were so many opportunities. And I, by the time number 5 was a teenager, I did the things I think I regretted, or I stopped doing the things I think I regretted. Hi, Tamara. And so I don't exactly have this kind of tabula rasa of, like, I look at an empty piece of paper and I say to myself, if I had another kid, how would I do it differently? Because it kind of a little bit got that experience and opportunity. But one of the things that I feel like I owe an apology to the older kids that I didn't do with the younger kids is have such a heavy focus on academic accomplishment. Like, there was a definite, you didn't have to get a grade, but you came home from school, you sat at the kitchen table, you did your homework, there was accountability. And my other kids will say, we just stopped raising our youngest. But in fact, I think what I really realized is that my priorities had shifted. The youngest didn't suffer at all academically, but it was mostly on him for his life, which worked out really well. Now, I imagine it's very different if you have a kid with issues, if they have special needs and an IEP and, a host of things that interfere. I don't want to speak to anybody else's situation, but in my situation, I probably would have shifted. If I could have the reverse order and see it again, I think kids would be different, as it would have felt like their childhoods were different and they had more ownership than I think maybe I did with the first compared to the last. That's my a little bit of that's kind of sad, right? I can't hear you, Steph.
Oh, sorry. How about now?
Uh-huh.
Okay, sorry. That's what my kids always say. I'm covering the mic. Maybe it's on purpose. So mine is about. I had a lot of worry about. It's so silly. I'm going to say it out loud. I was so worried about raising like entitled a-holes, for lack of a better word, that I feel like I was so concerned about like the politeness and like doing the right thing and like all the things that I know now. One, they are who they are. Two, we like they model what you do in your home. Like I put such an emphasis on it that, and I'm not sure why, because I saw, in 3 kids, like they're gonna do what's kind of around them and with the healthiest dose of who they are. So I wouldn't have been as like worried about, like, I remember seeing people with older kids. I'm like, oh my God, how can my kids turn into those kids? Like, where you enjoyed being around them and you're like, and I was trying to picture how they would go from like the screaming to that and thinking, I'm going to make sure, like, I am going to make sure that they are polite and they are like all these things, which it's so dumb. It's so dumb when I say it out loud. It seems so.
I think I'm the opposite of you. I think I reversed the whole thing, where with my younger kids, I put much more of an emphasis on their character and moved away from like the routine of the day, like the ritual of the day, which included a dedication to success in academics. And I think I just started to see that what really mattered to me was that they were good kids, that they cared about other people, and that they lived a life where, and it's not about, I mean, I cringe when like I'm in a neighborhood where as the houses turn over, they're young families, and the mothers will say, first they'll call me Mrs. Borison, which I've never been my whole life. And then they'll say, hey, look her in the eye, say hello, Mrs. Borison. And I'm like, oh God.
Exactly.
I don't care. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
That was me.
So I guess that's probably more what you're talking about, right? Like that kind of
just like making sure. And it's so funny because it's like it is so funny to me. Now, the other thing I'm going to say, which I think we're rewriting a little bit, like I'm listening to you and I'm picturing your kids, right? Whom I've known a long time. My oldest, people used to say my oldest, that my birth order was mixed up. Like it's usually that oldest one who's serious and sits at the table. And I didn't have that one. So to force, like whatever I tried to force in terms of like the academic, like sit down as soon as you, like he was not that kid. He had to go play the piano. He had to go have like get his spilkus out, right? Like it would have been a disaster. And I know it would have been a disaster because I must have tried it. Do you like I can sit here and say, oh, it would have never worked. I am confident I tried it until I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. Right. It worked with my first kids. Like they did it. They complied.
Exactly.
Right. So it's really hard to know, right?
Exactly. Whereas numbers 2 and 3, I remember when number 1 left for college, and the way our house is set up, you come in, like our garage is attached, you come into the mudroom and then the kitchen, and I can see into the kitchen from the garage. I must have been coming in from a work meeting, and those 2 were home and they're sitting at the table and you could hear a pin drop. And I walked in, I'm like, this is bizarro world.
Yeah.
Because right. So right. We can sit here and rewrite it, but so much.
I know who's to say how do we remember that it was child dependent and we actually did what was good for that child? But in my house, I could say the next 2 would have also sat at the kitchen table, and that was somehow a thing that was done in my house. And I just kind of stopped caring so much about that, And then I would say the other reason I know this is a little birth order for me is my second kid called my father-in-law Gimpa before he could say grandpa, which I think, first of all, it is my grandfather. It should have been his name. It would have been so perfect. And instead, every time he said it, I said grandpa, because I was about them, being their best selves, which included pronouncing the word correctly. If my 4th or 5th would have done that, I'd been like, oh my God, that's adorable. Yeah, let's go with that,
Totally. That kind of fits what I was saying.
Oh, Lori, I was so happy to get a happy birthday from you. And now you're here today. Yay, yeah. Lori.
Okay. Can we talk about what we should have worried about?
Sure.
I should have worried more about driving.
Oh, good. Great one. 100%. Oh my God.
Yeah, we should just end it right here because there's not a lot to say.
Mic drop, right? No, I guess I have something to say, which is I believed that the state was worried about my kids driving. And so if they met the requirements of the state, we were done. And by the way, my kids believed that also.
Same.
After they got their license, if I said anything about their driving, they would go, Mom, I have my license. Like that was proof.
And I believed them.
Yeah. That's a good one. That is a really good one. Okay. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like that is a mic drop, because it's, we would try and run programs and even write about driving. And what we started to see was that people are only worried about driving, like when their kid gets their permit, and then they stop worrying about driving when their kid gets their license. So there's this teeny little window. And during that time, you're very busy driving with them, teaching them to drive. And then somehow, like, they leave the test and like, here's the car. You're great.
And you know what? Here's what I'll say. I think even just shit, like, great. So the state, even if you want to go with what the state says and you're bucking the trend on it, I would like we did do a winter driving skills with one of the kids. I think the oldest one, but I should have done it with the other 2. But the other thing is I should have said, like, yeah, you're allowed to get your license, at the 50, and we're going to have another 20, and it can be done over 2 months, but we're going to still plan out times where I'm in the car with you and I get to say what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Say. I know. It's so wise.
staged, right? It can kind
Yeah,
of be.
because why would they be great drivers? I mean, I'll tell you, the most embarrassing emotion I had around driving was I was so desperate for my oldest not to fail the driving test that when she told the story about how, so in Ohio, you have to do maneuverability, and that's kind of the thing that gets kids. I grew up on the East Coast, so did Stephanie. We did parallel parking, which is much easier for some reason, even
Yeah.
though it's the same exact movement, but you have a curb. And in maneuverability, you have cones and you have to be able to, anyway. So for her driver's test, the instructor or the tester, whatever they're called, said to her, if you want, you can start over, which means she was about to knock down the cone, which would mean she failed the test. So she gets to recenter herself
Wow.
and pass the test. And I am thrilled and delighted that she got the tester who let her do that a second time. Why? Why wouldn't I say this is about safety and readiness and you need to practice more before you get your license? It's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but the only thing I'll say is if I equate that, I never thought about the maneuverability and parallel parking. If they are truly relatable, and I'm a very good parallel parker, but I do
There, me also. I feel so proud of that. Excellent.
same, and from either side.
Oh, I have to think about that. I
Yeah.
think I'm only one side. You win. You win.
Yeah. Okay, but
Yeah.
and I think that in a parallel parking situation, there are times where I start and I'm like, oh wait, and I'll go back out and then reposition. So
But
if it's
that's a lifetime of driving. That's not
yeah,
the
that's true.
Oh,
That's true.
okay. So Lori says, I can answer that because we always want them to succeed the first time. You are so right, Lori. So right. Like we are so fearful that a failure will take our kid down. And even a little bit embarrassing for us as the parent. Lori, greatest point. Okay, so what we would do differently. What was yours? Oh,
No,
no.
mine was just what I didn't worry about and what I should have.
Oh, and you should have worried about driving. And I think I should have worried more about, well, it goes together. I can't think of anything other than like pulling back a little bit from the academics. And not that I don't think academics are important, but I think the school reinforced that academics were the most important.
Yeah.
And I think in my house we bought into it. But
Yeah.
in fact, like collaborative work is the thing that matters most in jobs today. And
Sure.
I think there was, for one of my kids, there was a lot of pulling out to meet the academic needs of that kid. And we were flattered by that. But in fact, I think I would respond differently and say, can that kid work with another kid who maybe like learn how to talk to somebody who isn't
Yeah.
getting it as quickly as you are and not have this like kind of hierarchy of like, well, you've already succeeded at this, so we better give you more work and more work. One of my kids was like a bit of an idiot savant with spelling, and in second grade, two kids in it, my kid and another kid, were spelling like pterodactyl and like they were spelling words they didn't know what they meant, and it was like, okay, find something else. Find a different way to create like some other skills for these kids.
You know, it's funny. It's reminding me of that meme that floats around this time of year, or actually about a week or two ago, where it says, "I'm so glad I learned about parallelograms in school because during parallelogram season, that would have really come in handy." Like the day before tax day, which I think is the funniest meme.
Okay, that is really funny.
Yeah, it hits me funny every time because it's like, what would have been good, what would have really helped out in daily living,
Yeah.
adulting, right? A
I know
class
what
just
we talk about. We just talked about, did you watch this past week of Destination College?
I did not watch it yet.
Oh my God, Steph, you've got to see the replay. And for all of you guys who are listening, I would say there's a little clip that's going to go out in our newsletter, and you can find that you can sign up for that, the newsletter at yourteammag.com / I think it's sign up. I'll just put it here. yourteammag.com / sign up. It was far and away like my favorite session anywhere about anything. It was so, I kept saying like, I don't have any kids to do this with anymore, but I think I want to watch it again and take notes. It was just amazing.
You know what's funny? You said at the beginning, maybe this is a way to bring this full circle. You said at the beginning, like, I don't want people to think like, how did you say it about thinking, oh, I could do this
Don't
whole
take
thing.
our advice. Don't take
Our
our
advice, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing, like how your ability to hear something and integrate it. By definition, do you have to go through those experiences? Like, where is that sweet spot where you can start to integrate something where intellectually you're saying, wow, like that's really great, but I still need them to get into the best college, right? Like, where can, like, it's very, I wonder what your brain, like, literally, I'm talking from a scientific standpoint, like, what can your brain take in when you do have real worry? So I don't want to take that away from parents. That's not fair, right? And we know that this is healthy and can really benefit everybody.
Well, I think our whole business is based on that. The whole
Yeah.
business is based on knowing can not only can it help you cope with the things that come your way, and you say like terrible twos one, right? Like everybody knows terrible twos, everyone anticipates terrible twos, and when it happens, you want to tear your hair out.
Mm-hmm.
But you also know your kid is acting the way a 2-year-old typically acts.
Sure.
So we wanted to say to people, when your kid hits adolescence, these things, when they're happening, you're not alone. You're not alone because it's happening to so many of us, not in the exact same way, but in enough of a similar way that you should know this is part of growth. So in that way, sometimes I think you can anticipate it. And then sometimes what we really offered people was, when you see it, there are alternatives.
Yeah.
Some of them might not resonate with you. And some of what, one of them, all you need is one where you go, I think that's the one that's going to work in my house, right? So I don't think it's that we're getting everybody ahead of the curve. I think we're more saying, when you see this,
yes,
your default might be the way you were raised or the way you saw your friends doing it. But, I mean, one of the things that touched me the most in like the last several months was, okay, what is her name? Dr. Cam. Yeah. And we were talking to her about friendships, and she said, friendships end, which we don't allow our kids to think about. We don't talk about that with our kids. And she said, I like to think about a friendship as serving me well when it was good.
Yeah.
And to me, that was such a generous, and she said, even if you're the one who gets ditched, you can still look at that friendship for the 3 years or 6 months or whatever it was as a teenager and say, for those few months, for that year, that friendship served me well.
Yeah.
It allows for like thinking about it as the end it's not shameful. It doesn't have to define the rest of your relationships. Like I don't know. It was so good.
I like that. I like that idea of integrating into like that conversation with that kid who is hurting. And I mean, not in that moment when they're hysterical, right? But like at another moment, like was there, like, as you look back at the friendship, were there some good time? Well, did it serve anything for you?
Yeah.
Did it fill your heart in any way?
All right, guys. Nice to be here with you. Lori, so fun to see you. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.